You're listening to the NCF&B podcast. The North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFB Pod, presented by Food Scene. That's foodscene.com, providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. And now, enjoy the show.
Listening to the NCF&B podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And we are recording at the home of one Chef Nick Anderer, who is the executive chef and partner of Mialino, Marta and Martina here in New York City. Welcome, Chef Anderer.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Lovely that we could edit, right? Yeah. For those that don't realize, we just gave Chef Nick's address and, the square footage of his apartment, how much he makes a year, and what he pays in rent. But thanks again. So let's just start with the simple and obvious connection. Why the heck are we in your apartment? Why are we here in New York? The truth of it is that we were coming up to New York in general to do a project for Matt and his family. And being that we do a show about food and beverage in general, we're like, we got to talk to people that are great and interesting up here while we're here. And we talk to people that we know, Raleigh. And one Chef Jeff Sizer of Royale, is a friend of ours. He's been a former guest of the show. He said, "Bro, I got you. Let me put a couple texts out." And then came back and said, "You guys know Nick Anderer. He's awesome, man, and I worked with him." So immediately there, I know you don't want to say anything totally offensive about Jeff, but just so you know, you can say horrible things about him.
We like to talk offensively about Jeff.
Yeah, but you did work. Where did you work together with Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff and I worked together at Mialino and the Gramercy Park Hotel. There was a pretty big operation there. It still is, and it's the same operation since we opened it up. Yeah, we opened in 2009, and I believe he was part of the very opening team, and yeah, we worked really closely with him, and I at a certain point, I think that we sort of sectioned off, and he took over the hotel operations while I oversaw the restaurant operations, because we have room service and a big banquet business on the rooftop there. The Gramercy Park Hotel rooftop is gorgeous, and so he kind of oversaw that operation for quite a while. But yeah, really funny guy. We had some good times together.
How many times did you ever have to ask him to take his Adidas hat off? In the middle of service,
or when he would go out in the dining room.
I don't think I ever had to ask him to take an Adidas hat off. I mean, we had our own Mialino hats with funky pigs on them, but yeah, he had some fun, loud sneakers, and a little hype beast.
Well, cool. Well, but so now let's talk about what's going on here. So now, as you even said, that you're positioned in a way, you live kind of where you work, and you're able to manage your life by having the 3 restaurants that you oversee somewhere in your neighborhood.
I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but
because now you're never away, right?
Yeah, I'm very, very close. I just roll out of bed, go downstairs, and I'm within 2 blocks of pretty much any restaurant that I've opened up. But I have guys, just to clear the record, I have guys that at both Mialino and Marta that have taken over operations there, so I don't really need to be at either Mialino or Marta. Joe Tarasco kills it over at Marta and the entire Redberry Hotel operations, and then Jason Pfeiffer, who had taken over the Mialino operations, so he's got that on lockdown. Although he's going to open up, shameless plug, a new USHG restaurant called Manhattan, which is going to open up this summer. Should be exciting down in Financial District.
Oh, that's going to be the reboot of North End Grill, right?
No. This is on a rooftop location, 28 Liberty. I believe it's on the 60-something floor. It's high up there. I haven't even been to the space yet to see it, but I've seen pictures of the view, and it's going to be pretty spectacular. So Jason Pfeiffer is just on his way out from Mialino, passing over the reins to Matt Spivey, who I think Jeff Sizer might know as well, but he was part of early on sort of core group at Mialino, line cook that made his way up through the ranks, and now he's going to take over as the executive chef. In fact, just did. So it's those crews are solid, and I've been spending most of my time taking care of this new little baby called Martina down on 11th Street and 3rd Avenue, which is quite a hike from up here on 25th Street. But yeah,
see, now you gave your address away.
But yeah, that's the new casual small pizzeria. Very different than the spots I'm used to opening. Tiny 40-seat, very inexpensive and a lot of fun.
So I'm going to go ahead and assume a couple of things just from knowing a little bit about your background. You're pretty much a Romanophile, Italianophile.
Definitely Italophile for sure. I mean, I studied art history in college, and it was at Columbia University here in the city, and the art history studies took me to Rome, and I fell in love with the city. We did 3-hour walking tours through the city every single day, and I got distracted by food. I mean, I was just always obsessed with food, even before, I was in college. I was cooking all the time with my mom at home, and so when I was in Rome, I got super distracted by all the trattorias, started making a list that I still have to this day that I keep refining of all the trattorias that I used to love going to. This is back in '97, so that dates me.
Would any of those trattorias be where Danny Meyer was working at the time, or no, those times when
No. He actually, ironically, did the exact same art history program that I did about 20 years apart, but I didn't find that out until after I had already been working at USHG for maybe 6 or 7 years, and we started chatting about it, and we turned out that we had this sort of common past thing, and that's what sort of led to the conversation about Rome and opening up Mialino. Actually, was this art history program that we did through Trinity College. So yeah, I mean, it was really that time, 1997, 98, that I got super immersed into Italian food, but specifically Roman food and Roman culture. And I didn't really come back from that trip saying, hey, I got to come back and do Roman food. That was never really a thought in my brain. I just came back and I wanted to cook. And so I started cooking, feverishly, both at home and also in between jobs. And my senior year of college, I was already taking on a full-time job cooking at the Water Club with Buzzy O'Keefe. Not with Buzzy O'Keefe. Buzzy O'Keefe didn't cook anything, but it was his restaurant.
It said that you begged him for a job.
I did beg him for a job. Yeah, that's right. I didn't beg Buzzy, but I begged the, I believe it was the pastry chef, because the main kitchen chef probably wouldn't even speak to me, because this was a time in New York City where you had to beg to get into good restaurants, and now it's chefs are begging anybody to come into the restaurants to work. It's because the roles have completely reversed, crazy, right?
Yeah. Is that just because of the sheer volume of restaurants?
Yeah, I think it's sheer volume, and I think that there's also just a different. I don't know any nice way to put it other than to say that there's a different sort of mentality with the workforce now with the younger generation.
Millennials, man.
Anxiety.
I get anxiety from my job, bro.
When it comes to vodka, it starts at the farm. Social House Vodka sources corn locally from a farmer who plants non-GMO corn. And because it's made from corn, it's also gluten-free. Social House Vodka comes from Kinston, North Carolina, and sources water from the ancient Black Creek Aquifer. Social House Vodka. Live socially, enjoy responsibly.
They want instant gratification. People don't want to pay dues anymore. They don't want to work like the guy that you were talking about at Mialino, started as a line cook and work his way up.
By the way, that's Forrest Raider Mason on the microphone, if you guys didn't know.
Yeah. But you got to speak a little louder to the mic. If you're gonna speak, then speak.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was. But would you say that's kind of the case? People want to come in and be rock stars instead of hustling on the Garmin station for a while or cooking?
Yeah, I'd like to put all the blame on the millennials, but it's not really just them to blame. We've created this problem, and there's a lot of restaurants. There's not enough people to fill them, and it's to the point now where it's not just that they want to rise straight to become sous chefs, but they have to. It's my job and all of my sous chefs' jobs is to try to get people trained up as quickly as possible so they can actually take over a kitchen. And it's scary, but it's also the reality. And it's if we're going to keep working in the restaurant business, we kind of just got to embrace it and be this is the world we live in now. It's the new normal. And some guy who only cooked for 6 months might be your next sous chef.
That's crazy.
So
yeah, it used to be
just work at making that person as badass as you possibly can make them in the short amount of time you have to train them.
The old cliche Hollywood story of whatever industry it was is I worked essentially for nothing. I interned. I did extra work. I did the job of the guy that was ahead of me, and I did that for years. And that's the way it was. And finally, someone looked at me and said, "Hey, kid, why don't I start paying you to do the job you've been doing, and then you make your way?" And in effect, would you say that's kind of how you got started? Because for anyone that's at the stature of where you're at, and I mean not to be like, so boastful, but you're running 3 very well-respected restaurants for Danny Meyers restaurant group that's internationally known. So many could say you've hit some success in your career, but starting from a kid and working in kitchens and making it kind of the old school way, that's how you kind of brought yourself up. When you were working, did you ever get like kind of that break where somebody said, you know what, I think I'm going to give this guy a chance to kind of be more in a leadership role, and if so, who was that and how that happened?
I think I mean, if I remember this correctly, I got my first break at Gramercy Tavern. So it wasn't until I started working at USHG that I actually took on a role of like real leadership. I mean, I worked at a lot of kitchens. I worked at Babbo for a while. I was at an American place. I was at Rose Hill. Like I said, the Water Club. And each job I was at, I pretty much stayed for about a year and then moved on. And it was just kind of like this internal clock in me. I don't know who told this to me, but somebody might have told me back then. It's like you work at it for a year and then you move on and then you see something else. And so that was kind of what was ingrained in me. And another old Japanese chef who I worked with, I remember this guy, Mitsuo Kikuchi. He was like a New York legend for a while. And I met him at the Water Club. He was like their fish butcher, but was badass. And he told me, he's like, don't take a sous chef job until you have, like, he said something ridiculous, like 12 or 14 years of experience. I'm like, Jesus, I'm going to be like, 40 years old before I'm like a sous chef somewhere. I didn't follow that advice to the T, but what I did do is I worked for, I guess it was about 6 or 7 years until I got that job at Gramercy, was a line cook for a while, and then took a sous chef position when it opened up there. So that was my first, like, I guess, leadership role.
I just want to define, most people who are listening to our podcast know what USHG is, but being that we are North Carolina based, some people might not know. That's Union Square Hospitality Group, also known as Danny Meyers.
Correct. Thank you for that.
No problem.
And Danny thanks you for that.
Yeah. So that would have been Michael Anthony that gave you the shot, basically, at Gramercy.
Actually, no, that was Tom Colicchio and Johnny Schaefer.
I've never heard of him. Have you? Tom?
Did Tom have hair back in the day?
No, he did not have hair then. That's his. Yeah, this was. Geez, what was this? This was like 14 years ago, maybe. Yeah, about
2004,
13 or exactly.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so, do you think? So, what do you think? Like, one, it was somebody giving you a chance. Also, you had all that experience underneath, but you were probably like just everything came together that you were ready for it at that time. I would imagine, like your skills matched your experience.
I mean, I thought so. I don't know what my sous chefs thought at the time, but yeah, I thought that I had put in some good work. And I just saw the opening, and it was the first time I could say to myself, "Let's do this." Yeah, because I can actually tell people the whys and not just not just show them.
Telling people the whys.
Yeah. So in continuation of our little journey out here while we're in Manhattan, we're actually taking a little trip later on today to Jersey. That's why we have a car picking us up in 45 minutes, because we're going to speak with Floyd Cordoz as well.
Oh, cool.
And I imagine that you must have crossed paths with Floyd as well.
Yeah, so Floyd and I, actually before I even started working officially for USHG, Union Square Hospitality Group, I had worked at Tabla, and this was before I left so there was kind of like a break in my career path where I was working in New York, a bunch of different restaurants as a line cook, and then I was going to scoot off to Italy before I returned from Italy, and then when I returned from Italy, I started working at Gramercy Tavern. But before I left for Italy, I had some time to kill in this one summer because I was going out there to work at this new restaurant that was open in Milan. And as restaurant openings go, delayed. Mm-hmm. And so I had these few months to kill. And I remember during those few months, I took a stage at Tabla because I wanted to learn a little something about spice. And I knew that Floyd would be the man and his kitchen team would be the guys to sort of show me the way. And so, yeah, I basically just worked in that kitchen for about 2 months just as an intern. That was really fun. Yeah, he's a super, super talented chef. Have you guys gone down to Bombay Bread since you've been here?
No, initially that was the plan, as we were going to do the podcast from there, but he said it might be a little loud. I think that was a conversation that you and I had as well. Like, Mialino could be a little nuts, it could be a little wild, which is why it's so humbling that you just said, no, we just do it at my apartment. It's like, oh, okay. So here we are, just 3 dudes rolling in.
So are you guys going to Floyd's home?
Yeah, we're going to his house.
Nice.
Of which, Matt's mom said, "Is he cooking for you?" And then when we said no, she's like, "Why not?"
I have a Jewish mother who we're staying with now, and hospitality does run abound, though. Like, she would be, if you're coming to my home, I'm going to cook for you or prepare something for
Right.
you.
That'd be great if we should bring your mom with us to Floyd's, and then she can yell at him and be like,
"You're not cooking for us."
"You couldn't put a little nosh out?"
Anyway.
This segment is brought to you by the Triangle Wine Company. Visit Triangle Wine Company stores in Morrisville, Cary, and Southern Pines, North Carolina. Or order your wine and beer online at trianglewineco.com. And be sure to use our promo code NCFB to receive 10% off your purchases. Triangle Wine Company.
So let's talk about with your restaurants. Now, we were focusing. You're an Italophile or an Italian file, but more specifically, you're talking about Rome. And so I don't really know. I'm new to the specifics of Roman cuisine. I understand, Sicily and Piemonte and all. So what defines Roman cuisine from just Italian cuisine?
So, I mean, a couple things. I can simplify it down to just saying, like, Pecorino, Guanciale, Black Pepper. Those are, like, ingredients that keep coming back.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that when you think about it a little bit more conceptually or broadly, it's kind of like it's food of the people. I know that a lot of cultures in Italy say that, it's like peasant food, but Rome is such an interesting city historically where it was so dominated by, clergy and nobility for so long, and so any part that's in the area, the center of Rome, was just dominated by that kind of culture and those people. And then and people in the outskirts and neighborhoods like Testaccio, which a lot of people consider like one of the gastronomic centers of the city right now for all sorts of reasons, but also I think primarily because the Testaccio market is down there, and the old macellaio, which is the slaughterhouse. But in that slaughterhouse is where people that were not nobility and clergy kind of worked, right? And so they would have the ability to take home all these leftovers. And so this style of cuisine was developed that they call the quinto quarto, which is basically the fifth quarter, which means you're taking all the bits of the animal that is not prized by nobility and clergy, and then a cuisine was sort of developed around that. So things like oxtail and tripe become sort of popularized in the Roman canon. So it really truly is historically kind of the food of the people. It's like the stuff that's left over that they figure out, sort of ways to either cure and salt or turn into something that's delicious, like face bacon guanciale.
That's awesome. So at your restaurants, is that a key feature? Do you do a lot of curing yourself?
It's definitely a focus. The curing, I'd say yes and no. Like I'm of two thoughts when it comes to curing in restaurants. I like the idea of chefs trying to take on charcuterie and do crazy artisanal things, but I'm also a fan of allowing people that do that for a living to do it better than chefs can, so that we can focus on the act of cooking and actually running a restaurant. It's hard enough just to run a restaurant and put food on the table, let alone try to make your own ricotta and craft your own sopressata and press it and dry age it and do all this stuff. So we do some of that. We play around, but we don't boast a charcuterie program that's all made in house. Like, we source most of our charcuterie from outside, and we make a few select things when we feel like we have a special recipe to share, whether it's like a country pate or some leg of prosciutto that we happen to find that we thought was cool. But we don't like run it as a staple.
Well, even as a nod to Jeff Sizer, I think he was working at, what is it,
Biellese. Yeah, Marie Biellese, yeah.
And those guys are top notch.
Yeah, they produce some delicious stuff for sure. We used some of their guanciale for a while. I think now we're using La Quercia guanciale at most of the restaurants.
But that theory of if someone else can do something that is essentially craft-wise better than the way you can do it, goes back to a previous conversation we had with Jeff Sizer about ketchup. And it was ridiculous. We said, so he's like, I make everything in-house. And then I don't know how we got on the subject, but we said, well, do you even make your own ketchup? He goes, oh, don't get me started. Like, yes, I make my own ketchup because I can make it better than whatever. And then his kitchen... Am I saying this wrong?
No, you're saying it the other way. He was like, I could never make it better than Heinz. Like, they had perfected it, and it's there, so why would I do it?
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, there's certain times...
That sounds more like it. I don't think that Jeff would say, I'm going to make my own ketchup.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah,
Definitely was. Yeah.
And bartenders, we talked about that too. Like, man, I've been making bitters for the last 8 months, and blah 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 blah. It's like, you could just buy these bitters that this guy does. Like, that's what he does, and he does a really good job with it. Instead of wasting all this valuable time I'm paying you to make the bar program here.
Well, that's the main issue, right? Especially in New York City, is the labor. It's like, I mean, I don't care. If I put enough time to it, sure, I bet I could figure out a ketchup that's similar to Heinz, but do I really want to waste all that time?
Right.
When you can just buy it. Yeah.
A giant can of it.
So that's segues beautifully into, like, I want to understand more about your partnership with Danny Meyer, because obviously he's, like Max said, internationally known, literally, and obviously trusts you as bringing you on as a partner in these 3 prolific restaurants. So talk to me about how that partnership came about.
I mean, Danny is an incredible human being and an incredible boss. He's obviously a great restaurant mind. I think it first started to really come about when I was at Gramercy Tavern, and I was a sous chef there. I was, at the time, I guess it's like, I was at Gramercy for about 6 years, so it was a long stint. It's the longest I've ever stayed at any one restaurant. And I was really into Italian food, obviously. I was trying to reinvigorate the pasta program there. I was working closely with Mike Anthony on that as his sous chef. And I basically approached, I believe it was Richard Corain, who's Danny's sort of senior partner. He's been one of Danny's longest standing partners at USHG, and told him, it's like, listen, I really want to open my own Italian restaurant. And he got the word back to Danny, so then Danny started to talk to me and back to Richard. And he said, well, there's this opportunity that's coming up at the Gramercy Park Hotel. Why don't you consider applying for that job? And I'm sure at that point he had other candidates in mind, and we were trying to figure out what the concept was going to be. And when he told me flat out, oh, this is going to be a Roman trattoria, I was like, my eyes lit up, and I was like, holy shit. It's like, well, did you know? Did you know that I did this and that? And like, so the conversation progressed pretty quickly from then on. Did the tasting with him, and then, fortunately landed the job there at Mialino. So that's how that partnership sort of began. And then after a few years of Mialino, as chefs have a tendency to do, or just restaurateurs have a tendency to do, you get antsy and you want to, like, say more and talk more about a subject. And so you're like, what else can we do, and riff on Rome? Mm-hmm. And so we started talking about this thin crust pizza concept, and that's how Marta came to be. Mm-hmm. And so Marta opened 3 years ago, and then we kept riffing on that. And we're like, okay, Marta's great, but what if we did something that was slightly more affordable? And so that's how Martina came to be. So it just kept morphing into different things.
Do you see yourself now as a chef or restaurateur, or I guess a hybrid?
I guess a hybrid, but definitely a chef. Definitely a chef with, I'm just trying to put on my restaurateur hat more and more. I mean, and I wish, I don't have any regrets about my career, but if I could go back in time, I would basically teach my young self to start thinking more about the business at a really, really early age, because it's like people don't think about that enough. Yeah. And especially in a city like New York, if you're not a businessman, then you might as well not be a chef, because you're not going to. It's the one has to feed the other.
Well, so Max always tells me that the literal we'll always point out that the literal French translation of chef just means boss.
It's actually chief, I guess. That's the real
chief. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Chef means chief, but essentially it just means boss.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of global, all-encompassing. I'm in charge.
Right. Yeah. Which, as a restaurateur, you have to be in charge and always thinking about like the bottom line as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you got to push paper. You got to figure out how all the admin work. You got to figure out all the numbers. And I wish, like I said, I wish that I had a better grasp of that pretty early on.
Already, and you've already established.
Am I young?
You look young. You look young to me.
He's got the part Japanese genes, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, Japanese people.
And you're not talking about denim. You're talking about
They live to like 128 years old on average, right? So
128.
Yeah, you're not even at like.
That's a real statistic. I wish it were.
This is a stupid question. Do the employees of the 3 restaurants kind of do they all work at, like, do you have cooks that work at one and then goes over?
Oh God, I wish. No, is the short answer to that. We have cooks that move from restaurant to restaurant, but more as on a sort of like permanent transfer basis, not on a like, hey, I'm going to go work at Martina one day and then at Marta the next day, right, and then at Mialino the next.
I was just thinking that would be a really clever way for like a guy, if he missed a shift. Where the hell are you, bro? And it's like, Oh, I thought I was supposed to be at Marta. You said Martina? I don't know, man. Sorry, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Yeah, you may bring up a good point. I wasn't even thinking about it from that angle, but yeah.
But it would be confusing if you're like looking at your schedule and you're like, dude, I can't tell. He wrote this chicken scratch. Am I supposed to be at Marta today? but
I've heard a lot of excuses. I haven't heard that one yet, though.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming. I thought you didn't work. Why would I tell you to work at Marta? You didn't work at Martina.
But that's cool. So now, as you said, there's growth potential happening right now. A new restaurant opening up soon. But what about for you? You just opened.
Martina just opened in last September, so we're about 8 months old.
So
yeah.
You're content with that being your newest project, or?
I think so. Yeah. Until somebody comes along and tells me there's something. Yeah, that's enough.
But you always have things on the way, and as we discussed in the elevator coming up here, you're gearing up for. Again,
we're going to the Tulum Food and Wine Festival, the second annual. Small festival.
Tulum is in Mexico, just so you guys know.
That's correct. He thought it was in Queens or Brooklyn a few minutes ago.
The Tulum Street Food and Wine Festival that you're going out to.
Yeah, what is that, 2 blocks away? Right? But that's cool. So you're out there. I mean, that's the beauty about being not just a chef, but a chef that's doing it right or kind of leading the pack away, is that you get to kind of travel around, you get to see more of the world, you get to show off a little bit what you know in different parts of the world, so that's exciting.
It is exciting. I love being able to do these things, and I wish I could do more of them. Obviously, if you're a chef at a specific restaurant, it's really hard to get away and do these things, but I think that they're so necessary, not just for the chef, but for the team. Just like the whole idea of getting outside of your four walls to get some inspiration is like an invaluable experience. And I think that even though it's Mexico, and I'm cooking Roman food, like there's stuff I'm going to bring back, whether it's like something that somebody did on a wood-burning grill and be like, oh, Joe, check that out, what that guy did down on the beach is pretty amazing.
I'm curious to wonder if there is maybe like a subsection neighborhood in Mexico that is of like very distinct like Italian descent, you know, like we were talking about like what's the El Pastor has a North African, Middle Eastern foundation.
Yeah.
So I wonder if in Mexico there's kind of like that similar
I
trend.
honestly have no idea. This is my first trip to Mexico ever. I've never been down there.
Oh,
yeah.
Don't drink the water.
Okay.
Drink the cerveza.
Yeah.
Mexico is like turning into a food hub. Like it is finally being recognized for what it truly can be, and there's so much happening there. Like basically any produce that you want grows there, and it's some of the best stuff in the world.
Well, that begs the question. So, obviously, you're known for your Roman food. Is there anything else that you're kind of digging on right now that you're like hardcore studying?
I love all the Israeli chefs that have been opening up restaurants lately, and Zahav and Shaya and now Saba.
That's like a big trend in New York right now.
I think it's a trend everywhere. I mean, because Denver's getting one, right? New Orleans, Philadelphia, New York. So it's like, a lot of cities are. So that sort of, I don't know what you would classify as cuisine.
Raleians, you probably don't know what's happening outside. But those aren't birds in the background.
Here, let me see if I can
Those are typical New York sirens.
It's cool ambiance.
Yeah. That's great, though. That is the perfect essence of being in New York.
Might be the top bed to our show, just like ambulance is going.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Israeli food, and have you been eating it, or have you play around with it?
Been eating it, been cooking it. Like when we had our family gets together to have Easter Sunday dinner every year. My older brother, who's not a chef, he's a doctor, has had this obsession with the big green egg, so he's like a barbecue aficionado now. So he was doing the big leg of lamb. And then he said, just you do all the fixings. So I was like, all right, got it. So I was doing like hummus and lutanitsa and, pea and feta salad and all these just all this Mediterranean-inspired stuff, paging through some of the cookbooks from Zahav and also some of the stuff I was inspired when I ate down in New Orleans at Shaya, which I thought was, one of the best meals I had when I was down there. So, yeah, that stuff is fun and exciting to me. It's also different. It's fun for me to use spices that, in Italian cuisine you don't really use a whole lot. Unless you're cooking, Sicilian food or really Southern Italian food that is a little more influenced by that sort of North African, Moroccan kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been sort of fascinated with spices and dark, deep, kind of like brooding flavors lately, especially when I'm cooking at home.
Nice. Saya, we're gonna have to check that out when we're at Tales.
Yeah. Sounds great. Well, I appreciate you letting us come on in here.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to get back to work, right? So, thank you. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything else before we wrap it up.
Well, Chef, it's been enlightening. Thanks for inviting us into your home.
Yeah, man.
And when you guys are up here, go to Marta, go to Mialino, or go to Martina, and you will eat and drink very merrily.
Guests of the NC F&B podcast receive a swag bag, including gifts from these exceptional North Carolina producers. Social House Vodka, Hungry Harvest, Alley 26 Tonic Syrup, Michael's English Muffins, Larry's Beans and 42 in Lawrence, Ramona Wine Coolers, and Happy Hour Vitamins. Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. I am the voice, Brian Hoyle. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.